Hey Kev, let's follow this trail over here. This looks like there might be something waiting down there.
All right. Hey, wait a minute. Do you hear that?
Yeah, I thought it was just me. What the heck is that?
I don't know what that is. Whoa, do you smell that too?
That's unbelievable. Hey, look.
What the?
Hey, look, those branches are moving over there.
What the heck is that?
Holy cow, is that what I think it is? Look at that thing.
Oh my God.
It's a freaking Sasquatch. Welcome to the Bigfoot Terror in the Woods Sightings and Encounters podcast. My name is W.J. Sheehan, author of the series of books, Bigfoot Terror in the Woods Sightings and Encounters. 38 volumes of paperbacks and audiobooks are now complete. May I have the royal trumpets, Kevin? Excellent trumpeter. Yes, finally, all of the series, the initial 12 and the 7 regional books are all completed. What a project it was. My brother Kevin, this is my co-host, KJ Sheehan. Kev, how are you?
Boy, I had to get the trumpet out quickly. I wasn't quite ready.
That's why you never leave your trumpet in its case.
No, it's always standing here on that little felt stand, you know. But it is about 8 feet long, so I have to make room against the wall to blow the thing.
Yeah, it's one of them Scandinavian mountain horns. You just lay it out on a carpet in the living room and walk to the other end to play.
Fortunately, I don't have the Ricola cold.
You know, Kev, as we get going here today, folks, our hearts and prayers go out to all of these people that are being ravaged by this tornadic storm system running up and down the coast today. Really horrific damage. You know, you see some of this damage, Kevin. These poor people, you know.
Oh, it's horrible. Definitely our thoughts and prayers go out to them. And speaking of which, I am sitting here recording now in North Carolina under a tornado watch. So if the connection goes down, I may be flying through the air with the Wicked Witch.
What a creepy thing that was, the Wicked Witch. I remember as a young person seeing that costume and stuff, I was like, ugh. Yeah, they did a good job portraying what a wicked witch would look like, you know?
Yeah, right down to the flying monkey pals.
Those little creeps.
Those little creeps. Never were truer words spoken. Those little creeps. With those bellhop costumes on.
Oh, yeah, with the little hat.
I think, what's his name that wrote Wizard of Oz? I think he might have been on some LSD when he came up with that costume.
Yeah, who dresses a monkey in a bellhop suit with a fez on top?
How can we make these evil-looking monkeys even creepier? Put them in a bellhop suit, I'm telling you, it'd be great. Maybe put little hatchets on their little belts.
Yeah, well,
that might be going too far now, but we'll go with the bellhop suit.
That was pretty creepy in its day, man. I'll tell you, that was a mix of really good and bad as far as your emotions watching it, you know?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it is good and evil. Linda, the good witch.
Yeah, the old battle between good and evil, and of course, in the end, the good always prevailed.
By the way, before the emails start flying in, there were no witches harmed in the making of this podcast.
But a lot of monkeys got loused up. I have a collection of bellhop suits for sale on eBay if anybody wants to bid.
Awesome. Awesome.
So, bro, what do we got today in our Cryptids in the News and Other Oddities segment?
Well, we got a little flying monkeys. Okay, not really. Now, we are going to go to the news, Bill.
Okay.
And a recent story from up in Pennsylvania, which, as you know, is a bit of a hotbed for the hairy man.
Yes.
And this occurred back on February 19th, so not too long ago at all,
Right.
just outside of Penn State University.
No kidding.
Yeah, and a student was out at night and he was hunting for raccoons pretty close by. They say about 3.5 miles north of campus along Spring Creek when at about 6:30 at night when this student said that he heard a tree knock. And he later describes it sounding like as if you took a bat and a baseball bat and gave a tree a nice firm tap.
Wow.
Yeah.
What was it called? Spring Hill Creek or Spring Creek? Spring Creek, okay.
Yeah, just north of Penn State, which is in Happy Valley, Pennsylvania, kind of central Pennsylvania.
Okay.
Right. And MK said he was using a spotlight to look around in the forest after he heard something. So in this case, fortunately, he wasn't poaching animals. He heard the tree knock and started to get a little nervous and looked around. And he could hear something walking along with him, as well as the ice and twigs snapping nearby.
Boy, that would raise the hackles on the back of your neck.
No doubt about it.
Can you imagine that? I mean, I was talking to somebody about this just last week, about being flanked.
Yeah.
There's got to be, I wouldn't say there's nothing worse, but if you're alone and you don't have a weapon, you're in the dark, and something is flanking you that you hear, and you can't see it, and it keeps happening, that is unnerving.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, we're talking about initially feeling like something's flanking you and hearing a couple of noises, which I've been in the forest and had that happen, but it gets a little stickier right here.
Oh, boy.
So he turns the spotlight to the side where he's hearing the noise, and he says that he saw, quote, something large and upright, unquote, go behind a tree. And then this comes from a report to our friends at BFRO, by the way. He told BFRO that he called his friend and begged him to bring an AR-15 rifle, more gun than he thinks he's going to need, or maybe just enough gun that he needs, to come help him get out of the woods here. And he says while he was still on the speakerphone with his friend, the student said that he turned and caught the Bigfoot in his spotlight about 40 yards away.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, and he said it looked like King Kong with a sharper nose and gray skin on its face.
Mm-hmm.
And he said it was like a pronounced brow ridge and sunken eyes.
Yeah, where have we heard that before?
Exactly.
King Kong, when you see this thing, it's just like, it's a beast.
Yep.
It's a genuine, beast man.
Yep.
I don't know what kind of super villain or superhero you would liken it to. I think of it as like the Hulk.
Yeah.
This block of muscle and mass, the formidable to see, it's just an incredible monster. And this guy, obviously, he's hunting raccoons. I wonder what he was carrying, maybe a 22 or something.
I was thinking of 22 because he's pretty close by to population as well.
Yeah, and you could crack off a 22 and take down a raccoon, no problem.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
But, wow.
Yeah, and he estimated, on his observation, other than the facial features and that, he said it was over 7 feet tall with a massive body, bigger than the biggest bodybuilder.
Yeah.
And he said that he could see it for about 2 seconds, plain as day, which I guess is a relatively long time if you're staring at a Bigfoot.
Right. Well, then what happened? Did it turn and move away? What was the...
Oh, I think he just lost sight of it,
Yeah. Yeah, what
and
a
it's
crazy...
pitch dark and 40 yards away in the forest.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he
It's
says, he says, it's a moment I'll never forget for the rest of my life because I saw that thing clear as day.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. Once you see one, it separates you from everybody else.
Yeah.
Because you're now left with the reality that whatever you thought of beforehand is now in the toilet because now you know.
Yep, 100%.
And that's what happens. People don't necessarily know how to deal with what they're presented with. They're left to themselves. Should I say something? What are people going to think? All of this stuff goes around in the mind. Will I be a laughing stock? And then you kind of hang on to it, which is not necessarily a good thing,
Right. Better to share the experience, right?
Yeah, no, that is interesting. And right up just north of Penn State, well, there's a lot of woods up there, man.
No doubt about it. Central Pennsylvania, pretty rural place.
Yeah, just because Penn State decided to have their university there doesn't mean nothing else lives there. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I look at over the hospital, Kevin, the property across Nichols, and the deer and animals don't give a hoot that those buildings are there.
Yeah.
They're just doing their thing, man.
They're there first.
Yeah, this is all land, and okay, so you built that there, so we're going to poop in your parking lot. And they do.
Man, I'll tell you, Bill, so that's the account, but I don't know if you can hear it. The wind is howling outside my window.
Yeah, I'm listening. I can't hear it, but 2 weeks ago, when my Bigfoot got blown down on the front lawn, which I secured the day before yesterday with 250-pound bags of concrete. It's not getting blown down again, I'll tell you that. We had wind gusts between 30 and like 60 miles an hour for like 3 days. And it gradually leaned and then tipped my plywood Bigfoot with 4x4 posts right out of the ground down to the grass. And I'm familiar with it. There was one night, Kev, I literally could not sleep.
Oh, it was so loud?
Yeah, it just kept coming.
Yeah.
Non-stop howling around the house with no let-up. And I have those two nice tubular wind chimes by the front and back doors.
Yeah.
And those things were ringing and singing throughout the entire night. But I understand. I feel for you over there because it's kind of creepy when you just hear that wind, unrelenting wind, screaming around your household,
Yeah, and honestly, what's a little creepier is I just pulled up the weather radar on my phone, and it's coming right at us. So hopefully we're done with the recording before the power goes out.
All right.
So what do you got for us today, other than tornadoes, flying monkeys, and a Bigfoot in the woods near Penn State?
Yeah, I got two, I'll call them two shorts here today.
Okay.
I like to go to these sometimes because I avoid them because of the length. I'm trying to fill some time here. So a while ago, I decided here and there, as our listeners know, I'm going to bring in a couple of shorts. And although this sighting may not be as dramatic as some of the ones I've selected for the volumes of my books, I included it in the books to show just how quickly a sighting may both begin and end. And this particular sighting was brought to my attention by William Langhart, a resident of the state of Idaho. Now, this is what William saw on May 30th in 2002. So he was in the Rocky Mountain National Park. Let me start by saying that. I was in the park that day to do some shooting, photographic shooting to be more exact. And I was approaching a large meadow in the middle of which an enormous bull elk was lying down resting. My wife Anne and I began to slowly stalk the elk, hoping to get into position for a few nice pictures. Anne was walking about 10 yards behind me. She was intending to photograph me from the rear, photographing the elk. Incredible as it may seem, I had made my way to within maybe 60 feet of the animal when it began to raise its head, lifting its antlers to the sky almost as if it was posing for me. In the backdrop of my picture was a wood line that was over 100 yards away, beginning at the edge of the meadow. Naturally, as I had the elk in focus in the foreground, the wood line was a blur in my image. Anne, however, who was still behind me and had already taken several shots of me photographing the elk, had seen something moving within the distant wood line. She walked up slowly to me and said, "I see something moving in the woods by the edge of the meadow. Look just off the tip of the elk's nose and focus on that dark object that looks like a tall tree stump." "It's not a stump, honey. It was just moving and then it stopped." I was now focused on exactly what she had described. To the eye, it seemed to be a wide and dark stump from a tree that had broken off some 10 feet from the ground. Only seconds after I had focused my attention on this object did it start to move. It began to pace back and forth in the edge of the woods, and Anne said to me, "It's a Bigfoot! Oh my God!" She was correct. It was a tall, hair or fur-covered animal pacing around on two legs. The elk suddenly began to rise, which prompted us to take our eyes off the creature momentarily to avoid any confrontation with the elk. The elk, however, after standing, simply began to walk away across the meadow, so we refocused our attentions on the Bigfoot. This creature was either looking at us or the elk, but it had apparently been there before we were. Perhaps it was waiting in the hopes of attacking one of the many other elk in the meadow, of which there were dozens. We began to watch it, using the limited zoom function on our cameras at that distance, and I could faintly make out its face, as well as hands and arms hanging from the sides of this beast. Now, I can't explain why, but at the time, I had the distinct impression that we had loused up its hunt. When it stood very still, it did look like a dead tree. But once it started pacing, it looked somewhat nervous, almost as if it was indecisive as to what to do. Several minutes later, the creature turned, walked away through the trees and up the hillside behind it. Anne and I had made several attempts to photograph it, but unfortunately at that distance, only she and I knew what we were looking at. In the photographs, it was simply too small to recognize if you hadn't known what we were photographing. All in all, it was a remarkable experience for the two of us. Interesting, huh, Kev?
Pretty cool. I thought it was our quote in the beginning of the podcast. She said, "Oh my God, it's a Bigfoot." It's like I thought she was going to say, "It's a freaking Sasquatch."
Yeah, but I guess that happens more frequently than we like to believe. Where something, in this case, it happened quickly, in situ. But how many times did somebody take a picture and later, upon examination of the picture, saw something else they hadn't noticed before in the background,
Yeah, or he's focused on the elk, right? Like if I understood it properly, and his wife is focused on him taking a picture of the elk, so she might see something in the background where he's really trying to get the expression of the elk, without looking at anything in the background.
Right, and it was an interesting photographic layout, right? she's already set up to take a picture of him taking a picture of the elk. So different perspective, you know. And I like their approach to the photography, but in so doing, she picked up on the stump moving.
Very cool. And here I am talking about you, talking about her, setting up to take a picture of him, taking a picture of the elk. Sorry, I couldn't resist.
Yeah, I know. It's a
and
complex.
Everybody's going to be listening to me talking to you about you talking about them, taking a picture of him, taking a picture of the elk.
You know, and it brings me back to our buddy Dave's, one of Dave's first encounters. And I think it might have been his first encounter in Oregon. He had pulled off a siding that had been somewhat overgrown on a logging road with his truck to take care of morning business, shall we say. And he had, even though he was in the woods, as human nature is, he just kind of went off the side of this siding a little bit to ditch it in the woods, so to speak. And as he was in the most vulnerable of positions, in front of him is what he believes is a large tree stump. And there just happened to be a glimmer of morning light coming through the canopy. And as he is taking care of business, the stump rises up.
Whoa.
And so here he is, as I say, most vulnerable.
Quite vulnerable, yes.
Yes, the stump in front of him has now elevated, and he realizes it's a Bigfoot.
Mm.
So the irony is that it looked like the Bigfoot was also in a vulnerable position when Dave assumed his position and got up to walk away. Did nothing else. That was the encounter. As Dave is there, the Bigfoot stands up from a squat and walks away up into the woods. Mm. Can you imagine that happening?
No.
So this has happened a number of times. The appearance of this creature, because you're not thinking Bigfoot. You're in the woods. There's a lot of dark-looking, decayed, dead wood. You see something broken off 6, 8, 10 feet from the ground. It's a tree that snapped off dead or got knocked down in a windstorm, right? And not always the case, though.
Right.
So this is interesting, you know, and this is in Rocky Mountain National Park.
Yeah, I've been up there, too, and there are elk all over the place in Rocky Mountain National Park.
Yeah, so prime hunting ground if you're looking for something to take down, you know?
Yeah, no doubt about it.
I want to shuffle over for 2 seconds before I grab this other account. You know, I've been watching Expedition Bigfoot, and in the last episode, they came into this area where they were finding these reeds of maple vines. Have you ever seen a maple vine, Kev?
You know, I don't think I have, Bill. I should have. I must have and not realize what it was, but I'm thinking of a maple tree with vines.
Well, it's a thick vine that's appears to be quite pliable, like most vines are.
Okay.
But the foliage on the vine are like maple leaves.
Oh, okay, but it's not a maple tree.
No, it's the same.
Yeah, then I've definitely seen that. Yeah.
Yeah, the same shaped leaf.
It's like a wild grapevine or something.
Yes, yes. Something or someone had made a number of these wreaths. They look like Christmas wreaths, circular, very nicely made, as a matter of fact. Almost, in my opinion, too nicely made. And they found a number of them. So anyways, I was talking to my buddy Rich in Washington, a former logger, and he kind of chuckled. And he said, Bill, I want you to ask Dave. So I had hooked him and Dave up a while ago. They're both loggers, and they talk to each other now. He said, ask Dave about what I'm about to say. And what he told me was this. If we knew we being loggers, knew that Expedition Bigfoot was coming into a particular area, if we had gotten a scoop beforehand, we would most definitely go into that area to mess with him. And he left it at that.
See, so I'm not being critical of them messing with them, but that's the biggest challenge with all this Bigfoot stuff. There's pranksters everywhere.
Well, it's true. And he made no bones about it. Rich Lloyd, Rich was the first guy who told me that his equipment operators had turned the trees upside down.
Yeah.
On Prince of Wales
and
Island.
Stuck him in the ground. Yeah.
That Expedition Bigfoot was walking around that one episode. And he also told me that loggers were notorious pranksters, hoisting old car engines up into trees and doing strange things that you would think, who the hell is ever going to see this? But once in a blue moon, somebody does. And it becomes a conversation piece, right? So they're just doing it to basically goof on somebody, whoever that may be, down the road, even decades from when they perform the goof, so to speak. You know?
Yeah, 100%.
But anyways, let me move on. So here is the second of the two. And this sighting was brought to my attention by Edward Shands, who is in his own right a renowned wildlife photographer. I don't know if we touched on this one before, Kev, but I felt like bringing it back up again. Now, Edward told me, as did many others, that even though what he saw was as real as the nose on your face, he has worked much too hard to forfeit his credibility by coming forward with what many would say was a hoax. Unfortunately, this is the current state of affairs when we're talking about Bigfoot. Here is what Edward not only saw, but photographed as well. Now, just to give you a background on this statement, this guy, this is not his real name. Anybody who knows me knows these people's names I mention are not their real names. This guy's photographic work has appeared in many very well-known settings, magazines, periodicals, whatever you want to call them. Myself, a guide, and my assistant had worked our way in close to Brooks Falls, located in southwest Alaska in Katmai National Park. My two companions were both armed, as entering this area during the Salmon run was an extremely dicey and dangerous affair. We had achieved a position some 75 yards from the western side of the river, from which, using my telephoto lens, we had watched as no less than 8 grizzlies had set up both above and below this set of falls. On the opposite bank of the river, there are several areas which are well worn coming down to the river, which are the pathways the bears have used for years to enter the river and eat. Although others do risk coming here to photograph the bears, on this particular day there was not a soul around. It's amazing how persistent the bears are in their attempts to catch a fish. They must miss 50 in order to catch one. So there I was working, taking pictures while my companions were on high alert, listening and looking over the surrounding area for any incoming bears. We had come in at around 10 a.m., by which time we had hoped all that the bears that were coming were already in the river. It was almost noon on the button when in 2 separate areas of the opposing river's bank, trees started shaking violently. I could actually hear them from my position, which was far from the river. As soon as this tree shaking had started, each of the 8 bears had turned their heads, looking in the direction of the sound. First one and then all of the bears began to exit the water, apparently spooked by the trees. Unfortunately for us, their exit was in our direction. The guide immediately said that we should retreat for our own safety. But I couldn't go. I had to stay, if only just for a few more minutes, in the hopes of seeing why they had scattered. The question being, what could spook 8 grizzlies from feeding? Only moments later, forget about minutes, emerging from one of the very same paths which the grizzlies had used to access the falls, came walking out not one but 2 enormous Sasquatch. Amazingly, the Sasquatch did not enter the river to fish the falls, as the bears had done. They actually walked into the shallow edges, with one walking in one direction and the other in another, combing the banks for the carcasses of the fish that the grizzlies had chomped on. I could see them swatting around in the grass, apparently searching for the remains of a salmon. I had confirmed my assumption when one of them picked up a carcass and began to consume it. When the grizzlies had consumed a fish, 30% of the meat and head was still on the skeleton. They would chomp on the main body of the salmon and then drop it, entering back into the river for another. The Sasquatch obviously knew this to be their behavior and allowed the bears to do the dirty work for them, feasting on the remains when they were through. The tree shaking was obviously known by the bears as an indicator that they were coming. From what we had just seen, the bears didn't want anything to do with them. Think what you will of them, but this singular demonstration by the bears indicated just who was the king. Unfortunately, we could only watch them for a couple of minutes more, not knowing, now knowing that there were at least 8 grizzlies in the brush on our side of the river. Both of the Sasquatch were massive, one being 2 feet taller than the other. Believe it or not, the smaller one was somewhat blonde in color, and the larger was more of an auburn shade. It was also interesting to see that they had chosen scavenging for the fish rather than getting in the river and attempting to catch the salmon leaping by the falls, as did the bears. The larger of the 2, in my estimation, was at least 8 feet tall, while the smaller was about 6. Both were thickly muscled, and their faces were both furrowed with wrinkles, their noses broad and flat to the face. Both of their skulls came to somewhat a rounded point, with the hair on the head being quite shaggy as it hung from the sides. The 2 largest bears in the grouping of grizzlies had to weigh in at least 1,200 pounds. And yet the smaller of the 2 Sasquatch appeared larger than they in its dimensions. It was an astonishing sighting and something that I will never forget. There you have it, Kev.
Wow. And Bill, I've been up there with the brown bears, which look like grizzlies, but they call them brown bears up there. Apparently, they just have a different diet that differentiates them. But I've seen them feeding on the salmon up close and personal, and they do exactly that. I would say they leave more than 30% uneaten, because we watched one particular bear one early evening, and he ate like 19 salmon. Just, kind of they grab it with one paw and grab it with the other paw and tear off like the fillet, that you'd fillet off of a big salmon and eat it, and kind of leave it often and just jump back in the stream and get another one.
And that's exactly what he was saying. These Sasquatch knew the habit of the bear to just get the main rip off the side of the skeleton and just drop it and go back for another big
we
hunk.
saw like junior bears or bears that weren't as good at fishing, right? Because it's not easy to catch these salmon. And the bears make it look easy, the skilled ones, but they would also come along and eat the leftover stuff.
So there you go. And even after the little bears were done, there would still be food there for,
I'm sure, and chomp,
But possums then, raccoons, who knows what else could come along and nibble on everything else that was left.
And that park where he was taking the pictures, that's the one where you see all of those famous wildlife pictures of the grizzly or brown bear standing like in the waterfall, catching the salmon in its mouth.
Right, and that's why he was there.
Yeah, that's where the best photographers in the world go if they want to capture another one of those images.
Yeah, now this dude, most people don't know wildlife photographers by name, whether they're famous or not. This dude had a lot of pictures out in a lot of different publications. And so he was one of the above that frequents, all of these fantastic locations to take pictures,
Yeah, no doubt about it.
And I don't know how many guys are on that list nationally or internationally, but he certainly is,
Yeah.
And interesting, though, huh?
Very cool.
So, and here you have the food chain, Big bear catches it, Bigfoot gets a piece, baby bears get a piece, all of the...
Maybe a bald eagle later on.
Absolutely, there you go. An eagle swoops down, grabs the carcass,
Yeah.
takes it back to its nest. All the little ones are pecking on it, getting the meat and everything.
And then you and I go back to the lodge and we eat a piece of salmon that somebody else caught and cooked for us.
Well, it's like... I remembered you telling me, Kev, about walking by Priest Lake. And I remember you describing what you came across as looking like a deer or an elk that had been blown up by a grenade.
Yeah,
like
the deer looked like it exploded.
Right. And then one of my hunting buddies from up there told me that as an animal dies in the woods, everything down to the smallest of creatures is going to have their way at what's left there. And the smaller critters, like the possums and stuff, are really the ones that disperse the final fragments all over the place, even mice, to make it look like this thing got blown apart in the end, you know? So the initial creatures would just have at it at the carcass and chomping on it, and ripping pieces off. But then as the lesser species, if you will, have at it, they're tearing away little pieces, taking this, dragging it over there. So the scene starts to look like fur and pieces scattered, who knows how many yards away from it,
Yeah.
But very interesting indeed. So, Kev, what do we have in our listener mail today?
Yeah, we got some good listener mail, Bill. So the first one comes in from Angela, and the subject is Long Island news. And this is Bill. She says, "Hi, I'm seeing the news that you're having multiple brush fires on Long Island. I hope you're safe, and I'm praying for you and your neighbors. I hope they get control of that situation soon. Take care." Mm-hmm. So how bad were those fires, Bill?
Well, it's behind us now, thankfully.
Okay.
But, especially post-California, when everybody's eyes were open to the horrors of what happened out there and the devastation. When these brush fires started going over here in the Pine Barrens, people were really on edge because we were on the edge of listening to what happened out there. And it happened to be during that section of time I told you where my Bigfoot got blown down. Thankfully, the day the first couple of brush fires started, and I haven't heard, they were suspecting arson at one point. The wind was gusting to 30 miles an hour that day. And one of the first witnesses on the scene on Sunrise Highway, she initially said she thought a car might have crashed into the woods and was on fire.
I actually read that story. That was on the national news.
Yeah, but then she realized, I don't think so. And in basically 10 minutes, the fire she had pulled up on had gone a quarter of a mile up the shoulder of Sunrise Highway.
Yikes.
And I saw we obviously, Kev, I know people all around this area and people living in that area and the area where it could have blown, And there was some really intense scenes. There was one picture I saw, Kev, where the fire was across the entire of Sunrise Highway. So it had jumped from the Pine Barrens on one side over the street to the other side, and it was a very nasty looking piece of film footage. But they got it under control, thank God, and snuffed it out. And I never heard any more about the arson. But initially, I was told there were 2 or 3 fires that seemed to have happened around the same time. And they were dispersed over a long area. Let's just say West Hampton, Hampton Bays, and Southampton or whatever it was. So it almost seemed like, how could these 3 fires get ignited, virtually simultaneously, or almost as if somebody was running down Sunrise Highway and stopped and ignited them in 2 or 3 different locations,
Yeah, well, it could have been as simple as a cigarette, in the dry weeds and stuff, and then the wind just amplifying the fire,
Yeah, well,
who knows?
But there you have it. But thank you for your thoughts. That was a couple of weeks back, and they got it all under control, and no houses were destroyed, no people were injured, so it worked. It worked out well, and the firefighters and everybody else involved really did the yeoman's. And by the way, folks, all of our fire departments around here are volunteers. These are people like you and me just working for a living, and they happen to be off that day, or maybe if things get a little too intense, they ask the boss if they could leave to go help out. But that's the way it works. There's no paid firefighters here on the island.
Yeah, so, no, that's really good news too, Bill. I didn't realize that no one was hurt and that no one lost a house either. So that's fantastic.
Yeah, and some of the pictures, Kev, the footage, these were raging fires.
Yeah, and in a relatively small area,
Yeah. And just like what you were seeing out in California, huge flames whipping up off the top of the trees. I would say your average black pine out there in the barrens, the largest ones, I'd say maybe 30 feet tall.
Yeah.
With most of the other ones probably falling in around, 10, 15 foot range. But this woman who was touted as being like the first to stop, she said in the 10 minutes that the flames were already licking up the sides of these black pines. So it was getting going pretty quickly, and it needed to be jumped on, especially with 30-mile-an-hour winds. Thankfully, a few days prior to that, the winds were between 30 and like 60 miles an hour, which is what knocked my plywood Bigfoot down. And so, that kind of wind, man, can really throw stuff all over the place, especially embers.
No doubt about it.
Now, they were just talking. We're talking about the tornadic system, the length and breadth of where it's covering. They were talking about winds in New Mexico on Fox News before at 95 miles per hour. and coming into Texas is like 80. 95, 80 mile an hour winds. I mean, shoot, man, that'd just knock you down.
Yeah, it's more than a Cat 1 hurricane.
Yeah, I mean, I can't even see myself standing in a 90 mile an hour. I got to believe it would knock me over.
Yeah.
So people need to exercise real caution out there, with fires or anything else under those circumstances.
Yeah.
Jeez, I could do something over here, and it could affect somebody 2 towns over in a 95 mile an hour wind.
Yep.
Jeez. So what else we got, Kev?
Yeah, our last email we'll cover today, Bill, comes in from Erin, and she's looking for a Bigfoot speaker. I think she means someone to talk about Bigfoot rather than a large speaker that looks like a Bigfoot. Maybe we can check both boxes. But she says, hello, the Meredith Public Library in New Hampshire is hosting a In Search of New Hampshire's Unexplained in July. We're looking for a speaker to discuss Bigfoot with at least a small focus on New Hampshire sightings. We're trying to keep it local. If you're interested, please let me know. We'd love to add you to the lineup. Erin, the library director. And Erin, send me the date. Maybe I'm not planning on being up in New Hampshire, but I love Meredith, New Hampshire. And we go up there probably every 3 years or so in the summertime to do some hiking. And you never know. Maybe if the date works, you can get the B team as a speaker.
Yeah, Kevin, that's what I thought of you when I sent that over to you.
Yeah.
And, I said, well, Kev goes up to New Hampshire periodically. It may be a fit.
No, and Meredith is one of my favorite little towns up there. So
And talk about keeping it local. A copy of the Northeast book you could tweak right into New Hampshire.
Yep.
And all the accounts from New Hampshire that I've gathered are right there for the picking and the reading.
I mean, maybe you could even give me an autographed copy of that book to bring with.
This might be an exception where such an event could happen.
Whoa! All right,
Yeah.
Erin, get me the date right away.
This may be an exceptional circumstance where I don't have to have congressional approval to send an autographed copy out.
Awesome. Well, great podcast, Bill, and we made it through before the huge storms hit me here. We still have electricity. Thanks, folks, for listening. Be safe out there, and our prayers are with all of you that were part of these horrible tornadoes that came through the southeast in the past few days. So hang in there, folks, and thanks for listening.
Yes, and remember, folks, if you should find yourself hiking in the Rocky Mountain National Park or the Katmai region of Alaska, or anywhere else for that matter, you best remember one thing, my friends. Always carry more gun than you think you're going to need. Sleep tight.